Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 160. This is going to be our last episode for a little bit. Just going to take a little time to gather our thoughts and stockpile a little bit of content before we get going with some of the summer season. But before we do, I actually have a really cool guest today. Actually, one of my favorite people in the game. He was one of my first evaluations when we first opened up Cressey Sports Performance Florida. It's been cool to see him kind of go about his business and also build a career from his time here in the United States to going overseas and really figuring things out. And he's back in the big leagues here and doing great. So easy guy to cheer for and a great story to tell as you'll learn as we go through this. So enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients through the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressey to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, Cressey. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who grew up near Pittsburgh and was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates in the 48th round out of high school. He opted not to sign and instead attended the University of Oregon as a two-way player. Eventually, he transitioned to pitching full-time and was drafted by the Dodgers in the 5th round of the 2011 MLB draft. As he worked his way up through the minor leagues, he was traded to the Marlins in 2012. He had Tommy John surgery early in 2014, but came back to make his major league debut in August of 2015. Over the 3 years that followed, he pitched in the minor leagues for the Orioles and Rockies before signing in December of 2018 with the Tokyo Yakult Swallows of the Nippon Professional Baseball League in Japan. Over 4 years in Japan, he made 235 appearances, including 80 saves. He struck out 290 batters in 233 innings and posted a 2.90 ERA. The team won the Japanese League Championship in 2021. He also pitched for Team USA in the Olympics in Japan in 2021. In December of 2022, he signed a 2-year Major League contract with the Arizona Diamondbacks and earned his first career MLB save on April 2nd against the Dodgers. Please welcome to the show, Scott McGough. Scott, thank you very much for taking the time. This is probably 9 years overdue, but I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, man. You're a CSP Florida original. You were, I think, my second evaluation on the day that we opened down here. I think you were here before our facility was even done. But what I thought was really cool about you is you had an interesting path to get the ball rolling in your, obviously your college and your professional career. Like, I don't think you ever really viewed yourself as like a pitcher first and foremost. You're always more of a shortstop. Like, were you not just a multi-position player, but also like a multi-sport athlete in high school?
Yeah, that's exactly how I kind of viewed myself. And yeah, so I played basketball, and that was probably like my favorite sport, I would say, coming up. But yeah, I got good guidance early on about, trying to be athletic in baseball. And it was like, well, why not play other sports? And being from the Northeast, it really helps that because you can't play in the wintertime unless you go somewhere else in the South or out West. So, it just was kind of forces your hand to not really pick up a baseball.
What was like the competitive calendar in Pittsburgh during like growing up? Like what were the seasons looking like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for baseball, we would play, if we were lucky, 16 games, in a high school season, just because the first, they try to schedule it in March, but there's always snow on the field. So yeah, we would, the older I got in high school, we would go down to Florida really to open up, and usually play like some tournament down there and play some games. But yeah, I would say like, we're April, May, June was the baseball season. And then we would play Legion ball, summer ball. And that was throughout the summer till August. And then, football's ramping up and basketball's ramping up. And then, you would try to play some games in the fall, but you really wouldn't play a ton just because everybody was playing other sports. Yeah. And then basketball, of course, kind of picked up for me.
Yeah, and obviously the fall ball is tough because you really have like 4 good weeks to play with before it's even too cold to do much of anything.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things I think is really interesting about you is Oregon. They had a team back in like the 1800s. It went away for a long time. I think it was 26 years that they didn't have a team, and then they restarted in 2009, which was basically right when you were wrapping up high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How does a guy from Pittsburgh, and you were a pretty good arm. You got drafted out of high school. How did you wind up at the University of Oregon when they hadn't even had a team prior to that? Like, what was that whole process like?
Well, I think they were scouring the country trying to get enough players, right, to make your 35-man roster, whatever it was back then. But they really saw me down at a tournament I went to in Florida, in Jupiter, the World Wood Bat Classic, I think it was called. And so I was fortunate enough that it was literally 2 weeks before the early signing period. And I was about to commit. I had a bunch of different offers, throughout the East Coast, nothing really out West, but throughout the East Coast. And I was about to commit before I went to that tournament. But I was like, I'll go to the tournament just to, make sure there's no stone unturned. And they saw me down there. And I hit the ball pretty well. I was playing shortstop at the time. And then I pitched maybe like 1 or 2 of the games through like 2 innings or something. And they asked me to come out on a visit. And I had 1 visit left. So I said, why not? Because I didn't really want to stay close to home. That wasn't appealing as much to me. I wanted to kind of get out there. My brother went to the South to play baseball. And so I was kind of like, I kind of wanted to flap my wings and, get away from the nest a little bit. And so I took the visit out there, fell in love with the place. And really for me, it was the relationship I had with the coaches. Just seemed like really personable people that kind of were like, bring you into the family. I got to meet everybody's wives and kids and stuff like that. So it was like that kind of checked off a box for me. Another box that was checked off was the funding that like to the baseball program. There was no stone unturned in that too, right? They're spending, I think one guy donated like $13 million alone just for the baseball stadium. And then they raised like another 10. And it was just like the stuff that they have to make the athletes better out there are just, the best in the country, in my opinion. So you mix that with really good coaches. And I always heard of George Horton, right, watching college baseball growing up. And so it was like a no-brainer for me to go out there.
Absolutely. I'm curious, like, what was it like when you arrived? I mean, obviously you're starting a program. It's 35 freshmen, right? Like and you're jumping into arguably the most competitive division in the country. Like, how did it go?
At the time, absolutely. And it was kind of funny because we had a few misfits that were from other D1 schools, right, that either, lost their scholarship or wanted to change a pace. And so we had a few of those guys. We had a few JUCO guys. You had a handful of JUCO guys. And they're like a different breed in themselves. And then you had a bunch of freshmen that were just had no idea no idea what they're doing, just going to college,
Yeah.
So it was like a nice mix of like 3 different types of groups of people. And we all kind of like that first year, you just didn't know what to expect. No one did really. So we went out there and we won 14 games, and it's like, I don't know, I forget. We were like 14-40 or something like that. And, we just were like, we got destroyed because we're going up against Arizona State, UCLA. I mean, you have like Mike Leake is Friday night, and I'm sitting out there trying to play shortstop. Like, I'm not going to hit that. I've never seen anything like that in my life up to that point. So it was, a rude awakening, I would say, but it really definitely helped us bounce back for the next season, because it gives you an idea of like how hard you got to work, what you got to work on. And it really helped.
When did you, I mean, obviously you went as a two-way guy. When did you make, the decision to pitch? How did that all play out?
They made the decision, I would say, for me a little bit. So I went to summer ball. So I was two-way guy freshman year. So I went to summer ball that freshman summer, and I wasn't in the like hitting BP like the first couple of days. And I was kind of like, huh. And I pulled the coach aside, and he was like, yeah, like your coaches said, like they want you to focus on pitching. So I was like, okay, like I'll listen to him, and did that summer. And then I come into fall camp the next year, my sophomore year, and was expecting to be playing some shortstop. And we talked about it, and they just said, not that it's off the table, but they really wanted me to focus on pitching because they thought my arm was better than my bat. And it was. I mean, I definitely agreed with them, but I loved the shortstop aspect of baseball, like playing defense.
So obviously it worked out for you. You were, a fifth rounder by the Dodgers. You were traded not long after that to the Marlins. And you had Tommy John early in 2014. As you go through that process, obviously you experienced two different minor league systems, and then having that happen, that's obviously when we connected as well. What were some of the big, lessons learned, on the Tommy John side of things? And also, like, in hindsight, like, your guy obviously didn't have like a ton of use in high school. Like, looking back, do you see any contributing factors, in hindsight?
Yeah, I would say, one of the things I learned was like the business side of baseball. There is that. That's with the trade. You go through these emotions of like, oh, how dare they trade me? Those are my guys. I love this organization. They drafted me. All that stuff. But you realize that the business side of baseball, I guess, that like, hey, this is cutthroat. That's how it works to make their team better. And you just were a piece that went there, and maybe it's better for you, maybe it's not. That was like my big like eye-opening experience in baseball that I realized. And with Tommy John, I think one of the contributing factors is that off season I tried ramping it up too fast. It was just kind of my fault, and I guess was dumb about how I started throwing. And I was a big long tosser, and I don't think I gave myself enough time, and I started blowing it out full football field. I'm throwing it 110 yards or whatever, through the end zone, through the uprights. And I just I think that's really what contributed to like my elbow kind of going on me. But yeah, just same thing with like the business side of baseball. They do these surgeries all the time, right? There's guys that this happens to all the time, and not every organization, if you're not the top prospect, which I wasn't at the time, I don't think, it's just kind of like, okay, we'll go get this, do this, do this. And it was something that Dr. Andrews said to me, was like, hey, this is your career. Like, you need to take the bull by the horns here and not rely on, medical staff or whatever with the teams, because, they have a lot of guys that they're dealing with. And he's like, this is your career. You need to take control of this. So that was like another like big thing in my minor league early years that helped me realize that like, hey, this is on me more than it is on anybody else.
Yeah, and I feel like, from the day I met you in the fall of 14, you were probably 6 months post-op at the time, give or take. I think back, you always asked very, very good questions. You were pensive in your ways, like you thought through everything, but it was always very calculated. I think that's a really important lesson for any, young athlete. You were much more mature at that point, but you see so often that people just kind of like follow the program and don't ask questions, don't learn why they're doing what they're doing. And, I think all along you had a really good head on your shoulders as you attacked it.
I totally agree. And I think that's something that Dr. Andrews really helped me with. Because actually coming back, I had a snafu. I got stuck, like my elbow, like they get deflection and extension, and I got stuck. And, I'm hearing one thing from my team that they're just saying like, oh, let's do this, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. It just doesn't add up to me. I'm like, would you mind if we just talk to the surgeon? And they were like, well, I guess if you really want to. So I fly up to see Andrews, and that's whenever he was like, what are you doing? Yeah. This is your career, man. And I'm really glad I did, because again, that just like reiterated to me of like, I can't leave my career up to somebody else. It's good to follow direction and listen to coaches and trainers and stuff, but you need to like double check and make sure that you're on the right path and doing the right stuff. And thankfully I did.
As I look at your career, it's interesting. You worked your butt off. You improved a ton physically. Between the time I met you and you got a call up with the Marlins late in 2015, and it was interesting. You took a big step forward physically. It seemed like thereafter was when you really understood probably more how to pitch. And so the progression was they DFA'd you in early of 2016. You were claimed by the Orioles. They then DFA'd you a little bit later. You were with them for 16 and 17. You went to Colorado for 18. You kind of learned how to pitch at altitude, which was an adjustment. And that was when Japan came calling. And I'm curious, when you look back on it, once you got to the point where you were healthy and, ready to go out and perform, what do you think it was that kept you from being a regular big leaguer? And then also, what was it that, the Swallows saw when they obviously, courted you to go to Japan for 4 years?
Yeah, I think the big thing was like the mental side of it, and kind of like you talked about, like I was pretty good, but I wasn't there yet. Like learning how to pitch, I kind of learned how to pitch, but I didn't understand myself. And that's the biggest thing I think I learned in Japan. Like they taught me a really good splitter, but I think the biggest thing was it was also how to pitch, like how to utilize my stuff the best. So like, now I know, like I used to be a sinker slider guy when I first got called up to the big leagues. I don't throw a sinker anymore at all, So it's like, okay, well, I throw this way, my hands this way, my spin is this. So this will be like kind of best case scenario for you. And this is what you should throw. And I started realizing it. And then I started being able to pitch with it, right? Reading a guy's swing, understanding the count, understanding this guy's scouting report, and using my stuff to that. And I think that's where I took the next step in Japan, was just being able to understand and put all those pieces together. And yeah, I was very thankful I got the opportunity to go to Japan, because at the end of the day, just being flat out honest, I was 28 years old. I didn't get called up for like the last 3 years. And it was kind of one of those spots that was like, they're offering me real money. Not that I didn't make pretty good money in the minor leagues at the time, because I was a 40-man guy and stuff, and I was free agent, but they're offering real money, like more than big league minimum. And it's like, go over there for a year, make some money, maybe learn something, and then come back to the big leagues. But I got over there, ended up falling in love with it. I thought the competition was fantastic. I thought my team itself was like really on the cusp of being really good. And I started learning, those things, and it was really intriguing, and my wife loved it. So we ended up staying over there another year and just fell in love with it and signed another 2-year deal after that. And it was fantastic for me.
I think people forget too. I've talked with a few, guys along the way that there's almost like a lull in a career when you're being honest, you're pitching games that don't really matter on the minor league side. Like it can be a long path. I think it's particularly true for high school guys where it's just such a developmental window. And it's like almost you forget how to compete, over the course of an extended period of time. And like you went over and you were in some very, very high leverage situations. 4 years in Japan, you made 235 appearances. On top of that, you pitched for Team USA in the Olympics. Do you think that was part of it, is just getting back into like a much higher level of competition, like where every pitch mattered?
That's a great point too. I think so, because over there, baseball is like their number one sport. So you have like a lot of the stadiums are big, right? A lot of huge stadiums. So like they're 55,000 people. And it really does like help you understand mentally, like how to do all those things, right? Because it's just a different speed, right? The game speeds up on you, and it just was really good for me to get the excitement back. And like you learn something new and you're like excited to go use it, right? And so that was really cool for me because I was able to do that. And it's helped me come back here where I got thrown into, which is awesome. It's what I want. But we opened up with the Dodgers this year, Dodger Stadium, and there's, 50,000 screaming fans there, and they're turning out the lights on the opposing pitcher coming out. And it was like, it feels like I'm a coaching, just because you get accustomed to that stuff. So, it's really, really helped me. And that's a great point of just having that like intensity brought up a little bit.
Yeah. Do they have the pitch mix adjustments in mind when they actually, reached out to sign you? Or is it one of those things where they saw as you a guy that, had a chance to go revive his career and they figured out what arrived? Like, I'm curious if you arrived in Japan and there was like a actual like action plan of, hey, we're banging the 2-seam and going to a 4-seam, which eventually makes for a good pairing with a split.
No, no, they're not. It's not like that. At least my team was not like that. It was just a scout that was in the stands, and our vice president, Japanese guy, he comes over for like 2 months basically, and he was just like, "Bob, you check the box," because I was throwing pretty hard at that time. I was like 96, sitting 96. So he was like, "Okay, throws hard. He can get swings and misses, and he has an off-speed pitch, and we can get him for cheaper than other guys."
Mm-hmm. So, all right, talk to me about learning a splitter. I've had some really good conversations, dating back to like early in my career with Kurt Schilling, and I've heard very different perspectives on the split, in terms of how much guys pressure it and all that stuff. What are your key competencies that you tell yourself, both as you were learning it and then what you do now that it's more refined?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely changed because the Japanese ball is different. So like in Japan, I was getting way more depth on it. So I would say in Japan, the things I would think about were basically staying on top of it, because I throw mine kind of weird. I throw mine like a 4-seam fastball. So I just split the 4-seam fastball. So it's like a 4-seamer kind of coming out. And so I just try to throw it as hard as I can, like a 4-seam with my fingers split. And so for me, I'm just thinking fastball, bottom of the zone. But in Japan, I was thinking more middle of the zone because it moves so much more. But that was like my biggest cue, and that's kind of been my biggest cue that I feel like way more comfortable after these last couple outings of really focusing on like bottom of the zone. I'm throwing right to the bottom of the zone, and I'm throwing a fastball, and I'm getting those bad swings that it looks like a fastball to them, and I just kind of, one thing for me too is I move my fingers up on the side, so I really throw it like a changeup, right, to take the speed off of it, which has been helping.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like learning to pitch at altitude, right? You just started in a different place. What else did Japan teach you? Like, I'm always fascinated. We've had guys like Michaelis and Drew Verhagen who have gone over there and had great experiences and come back to the big leagues. Do you think there's things obviously beyond just like, reinitiating the competitive landscape, obviously some pitch mix? Like, are there other things about the game there that you thought were really positively impactful on your development?
Yeah, I think like even off the field too, like perspective, just like perspective in life, because it's a different culture where it's like a serving culture where everybody tries to help everybody. There's no like animosity or anything like that towards anyone. So it's really that was kind of like a unique experience for me, just how nice everybody was and how they're all trying to help and like pull in the same direction, really. But I would say like baseball wise, like, I don't know, it was just really cool because you could see them work. Like they work very hard, sometimes to a fault, right? It's more quantity over quality work, where we're better than, like, in my opinion, America's a little bit better than that, like baseball terms. We kind of get like the quality work in. It might be 10 reps, but that's it, right? Because you're playing this game 162 games a year. And so in Japan, we play like 142, I think it is. But they work and work and work and work on their craft, and they just focus on whether it's blocking drills as a catcher, and you're going to do that, and you're going to get really good at it. And they focus on that, whether it's 95 in the summertime with 95% humidity, or in fall camp when it's like 30 degrees outside and you're on this little island down in South Japan. So that was big for me, was kind of finding my routine. I watched them, and I didn't want to do quite the extensive work that they did, but I watched them and I figured out my routine of like what dry work I wanted to do. What they had me use a racket, and that was another drill that actually was kind of funny to look at, but it really helped me. Was they had me use like a badminton racket. And so I would do dry work with this badminton racket because it forces you to kind of like stay through and like snap on top, like get on top of the splitter. And so that's what they do with like a lot of the splitter guys, is they have them use badminton rackets. So I'm sitting on the mound doing my dry work with this badminton racket, swinging it around. People are taking photos, and you're like, well, hope this helps.
If you could take some key pearls of wisdom away from the Japanese game and bring it back to America, not necessarily even wisdom, but like parts of the Japanese game. Like I know guys have traditionally loved the baseball, kind of the level of tackiness that's involved in the NBB. There was a lot of talk about that after American players played in the Olympics. What are some? Obviously, we've seen a ton of rule changes in American baseball this year. Like, what are some things that we might be able to learn from that Japanese baseball culture?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the baseball. That was probably my favorite thing is just it comes naturally tacky
Mhm.
and it just really helps guys don't have to use stuff like it really helps give them a grip and throw their pitches the way they're capable of throwing their pitches, but it also protects the hitter in my opinion that guys aren't slinging it, 102 miles an hour at someone's head.
Mhm.
That was like a big thing. I also enjoyed just the part of the game was like they kind of played a little like currently like my team is like the Diamondbacks are like we're not afraid guys aren't afraid to sacrifice themselves and bunt or
Mhm.
a hit and run where I don't think that happened as much. I know with the new rules and stuff more teams are utilizing the stolen bases and hit and runs
Yeah.
and things, but yeah, that was like a big thing for me that I kind of was impressed with. You mean you have your 4-hole hitter sometimes that are it's laying down a bunt, and
Mhm.
there's just like it's sacrifice for the team, which I thought was
Yeah.
really interesting.
That's wild. Is there definitely a different approach as like a pitcher, like needing to field your position much more, just because guys don't like to strike out. They are more contact oriented over there.
Yeah, one of the first games I blew a save. We're playing the Tokyo Giants. Ball didn't leave the infield.
Mhm.
And it was just like, a guy hits a nice like soft ground ball through the 6-hole, gets on first, gets on second, punts him over, and then they pull a squeeze that I was not expecting. Like when was the last time someone squeezed? So they just dropped down, and it's a perfect bunt, right? Perfectly executed bunt, and I'm like, so then they scored the run, and I blew the game, and it was like, well, that was great, and it was like it was a good lesson for me though that like, hey, I really need to focus on my PFP.
Yeah. Maybe this is an interesting question that relates to both Japanese and American like baseball as you've returned. Managing in season training and throwing is one of the toughest thing for relievers. Like you were a guy, like you've made a lot of appearances. Like 235 is no joke over the course of 4 years. And I know they have a kind of the 1 day a week off, which maybe makes it work a little bit easier, and there's kind of some guaranteed rest. But a lot of things that guys struggle with is managing how much they throw, how they lift. Do you have big picture thoughts that you've learned that you think have helped you to, you've been largely healthy since your Tommy John in 14. You have any thoughts on what's worked for you to stay healthy as you've gotten into your 30s and your workload has gone up?
Yes, and when I first I'll never forget this. When I first got called up to the Marlins in 2015, um, I was a rookie that gets called up, so I didn't pitch every day. I wasn't throwing the seventh or eighth or ninth innings, so it was kind of like wait for your time, whatever the score is, your spot that you're going to throw. Well, that happened to be a long period of time, and I was like, well, I'm going to wait to work out till after I throw because that's kind of how I did it at the time. Well, that ended up happening, and I lost weight, and I just got weaker because you don't throw for 10 days, and then you throw twice, and then you wait another 14 days, and it's just like, well, that wasn't the recipe to do it. And so I realized because I was like 100, and I dropped like 10 pounds. It was bad, and I dropped, and I remember coming to you that off season, and like, first thing we need to do is get some weight and some strength back, right? And so I realized the best way for me as a reliever was to have a set 3 days and keep it consistent, that it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, whatever you want to do. And in Japan, I really like fine tuned that with the off day. It kind of helped having those 3 set workouts and then reevaluating in the summertime of like, okay, am I getting beat up pretty good? You have your deload week once a month, and am I getting beat up pretty good? Then we can move to 2 total body workouts. And that's what really helped me figure out like, okay, I'm not killing myself. I'm keeping my strength up. I'm keeping my weight on. I'm doing all those things. And with throwing, I was always a big believer of like, if you don't use it, you lose it. But I've come to find that that's not the case. And I definitely have like a good routine of early on in the year, my catch play, and I basically is, I go out or shorter as far as I want based on the number of outings or how I'm feeling that day. And then later on in the summer and towards the end of the season, I bring that back in, and I'm only throwing. I don't go very far. Maybe once a week that I'll stretch it out and go kind of like 200 feet or something like that.
Interesting. So, I mean, when you're talking about those 3 lifts a week, are they microdosed? I mean, these aren't full lifts where you're doing 90 minutes. You're in and out,
Correct.
be succinct with it. Kind
Correct.
of
I'll do a
take it.
couple correctives, that you've given
Yeah.
me or something
Yeah.
like that, and getting the body in the right position, and then I'll do, whether it's that day the front squat and
Mhm.
like a push and a pull,
Mhm.
and then maybe core exercise. You're looking at 4 or 5 things that I kind of do in those total bodies.
Yeah, I think people wait around for the perfect time, and if there's one thing you realize pretty quickly as a reliever is that perfect time never comes.
Right.
What about the actual like recovery side of things? What are the things that you've used that you think have been helpful? Is it other modalities? Is it manual therapy? Is it something on the nutrition, sleep side of things? What's helped you as you've aged with a high workload?
I would say manuals have been very helpful, and also utilizing sleep, like realizing how important sleep is, and eating. I mean, nutrition is really important too. That's always kind of tricky if you're navigating it, whether you're in the minor leagues or a high school kid or in Japan. It's not like the easiest thing to like, hey, I'm gonna, drink my cherry juice after my start, and do that. You don't always have those things, but I would say sleep is just something that you can control, and really focusing on getting sleep. And after I throw, like I really do my manuals, and that's really helped me kind of just stay healthy and strong throughout
You,
the process.
you just used the line, sleep is something you can control after having a baby less than a week ago. This is the ultimate karma that if we've ever had karma on this podcast, that's it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna knock on wood for you. But all right, we always rock a little bit of a lightning round at the end of each podcast, chance to kind of, I mean, you can dig it as deep as you want, but it's a quick question from me. So if you could go
Okay.
back in time and give teenage Scott McGough some advice, what would it be?
Oh, teenage Scott McGough. Yeah, I would say just like figure out the pitcher you are, like, and just stick with it. That would be my biggest advice to myself back then.
Yeah, and there's more in your defense. There's way more resources available now than there were back in the 2006 to 2008 period when you were you couldn't look at spin axis and all these different pitch profiles back then. Now it's all there. There's no excuse for not knowing it for guys now.
Right.
And this is what I'm actually fascinated about because you are a guy that's traditionally pounded the zone pretty aggressively. What's more important, stuff or command?
I think, well, this is going to be, I don't know if you're going to agree with this. I think you got to check the box off on stuff, but you got to have command. Got to have command.
You can't always be pitching down 2-0 in every count.
Right.
I like that. That's probably the best answer. I've asked that question to a lot of guys, and I haven't used it for a while, but that's a really good response. What pitchers do you like to watch and why?
Well, I like watching guys that are like hard throwing. Like I like watching DeGrom. I've always when I was in the minor leagues, I was watching Walker Buehler back in 2018, like that year. Just I liked his mechanics and how like he just really looked like a rubber band to me. The way he uses his mechanics and kind of gets after it. Those are just 2 guys that pop into my head that were really fun to watch.
I like it. What's next for you? What do you think the next aspect of your development is that will continue to kind of prolong your career and make you successful?
I think for me, I would say, because like I feel like I have a good fastball, I have a good splitter, and my slider's been usable. It's been it's there, but I would like to tune that up a little bit and kind of utilize some of the different grips that we have, this whether it's the sweeper or whatever, because like currently I have a gyro slider, and so I can use that, but I think I'm gonna play with how they all kind of work with each other. Having that third piece will really kind of extend me a little bit more than I'm not just someone can size me up of like, hey, I'm gonna pick this or this today.
I like it. Well, Scott, you've been an amazing friend and supporter of CSP over the years. And it's been awesome to be able to cheer for you both in person and from afar. So appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Folks can find you on Twitter if they're there. It's at Scooter McGough or Scooter_McGough. Not sure you're a super active tweeter these days as a new dad, but wishing you well this season and really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks a lot.